Welcome to the First Responder Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Conrad Weaver. Thanks so much for tuning in. Hey, today's episode takes us deep into a firefighter's journey through trauma, burnout, and ultimately his healing. My guest is Jon Vargas, a firefighter with the Los Angeles Fire Department and the host of the Grab Lives podcast. Well, a few years ago, he had a serious head injury that left him in a state of really extreme anxiety, panic, and even suicidal ideation. And he found himself in a system that wasn't fully equipped to help. And what followed was a deeply personal and sometimes unconventional healing journey. Now, I want to be clear, this podcast doesn't necessarily endorse every method or path that Jon or other people share, but I do believe it's vital to listen to what has worked for real people, especially those people like Jon in those high impact, high stress roles. So Jon's story offers a unique perspective on what it means to reclaim your health mentally, physically, and spiritually when the system around you may not have the answers. So let's dive right in. Here's my conversation with Jon Vargas. Well, Jon, welcome to the First Responder Wellness Podcast. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Conrad. I really appreciate you.
How in the world are things in the great city of Los Angeles?
Well, I live in Long Beach, but
Okay.
I just got off work this morning, and I'm stationed in West LA, Station 92 for the city of Los Angeles Fire Department. So things are just going. The machine keeps moving.
It's always going out there, I think, right?
It's always moving.
You know, one thing my wife and I have started to enjoy recently is on YouTube, you can find these police chase videos. They all come from LA County. I mean, it's like every other day there's a police chase. And
We just had one last night. It was a police pursuit from East LA, starting in East LA, ended in West LA. And turned into a auto fire with a multi-casualty incident.
oh my goodness.
That was around 9:00 last night.
Wow. Were you on that scene?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It was in our district. So
Gotcha. Yeah. The one that was crazy the other night was where they hijacked a pickup truck, ran that into, the wrong way up the interstate. And then they hijacked a semi truck. It was like a milk truck, tanker truck, like a full on semi. And then they drove it into downtown LA. It's like, I guess criminals will always be stupid, I guess. I don't know.
Man, LA is crazy. I really, now these days, I can't even remember the calls I go on. I think if you had set up like a Jeopardy table and you gave me some categories, I could pick from those categories and give you a memory. But other than that, I just shut it out, my memory,
So speaking of memory, how do you deal with the calls that you go on and the calls that you've been on in the past? Because we all know those can be sticky.
It is and it isn't. It's strange because, I think after a lot of self-reflection on myself, I really feel like it depends on the person. For myself, I think what gets me is the death of 1,000 paper cuts kind of idea, because it's not just one call, it's multiple calls stacked together and combined with a lack of sleep. So that's what gets me into a state of burnout.
So I'm just curious here. Do the calls, are they very distinct in your memory or do they kind of blend together?
It's strange because, I didn't really have an issue with the calls I've been on. There's only one category. I would say suicides are the only ones that disturbed me. And I think that's a great question to bring up, is for anyone that's trying to do some type of excavation on themselves, you really got to ask your question, what is disturbing to me? Because that's really going to lead you down a path inwardly to find out what's the root cause of that, which I find to be really fascinating because it's very different for each person. If I have a partner who I'm working with who has, or anyone on the fire apparatus who has let's say a 3-year-old child, and we go on a call with a 3-year-old child, that affects that person. I don't have a 3-year-old at home. I have a 10-year-old. So you're just, a lot of times people correlate a call to an experience they're having, a direct personal experience they're having at home, and they replay or they have that image of that person in their mind. So it's almost as if they're working on that relationship with that person that they have a personal relationship with. And they put a lot of meaning to that. And that's what I think can create, I would call it a feedback loop for a person.
At what point in your career did you start thinking about these things and how the job was impacting your mental health?
Oh man, I went through a crisis, and it started with head trauma, injury on the job. And that's what broke me. So once something like that had occurred, I had to deal with something that was physical, and it was kind of like the levee had broken and everything just flooded through. Through that process was a moment to try to understand what was really going on. And a part of that was being in isolation, being separated from my tribe, my station members, which had created a lot of discord within myself. A lot of self-identity crisis started to play a role in that experience. So I think that's what started it off for me. Luckily, I had some mentors that helped me understand what was going on, so I can put some language or a narrative to what was actually happening. And from there, that was my path of finding a way to balance what was really going on and finding answers to a lot of questions I had.
Going back to what you said, that this event, this injury broke you. What do you mean by broke you?
Well, the head trauma is very strange in a sense where each head trauma is very significantly different for each person, depending on where you hit your head, how many concussions you've had, and the severity of the traumatic brain injury. So for me, my nervous system was extremely dysregulated. So some people get extremely angry, or they have anger episodes with extreme rage. And the other side of the spectrum is extreme anxiety and panic, paranoia. So I pulled the card of paranoia, anxiety, panic. So with having to kind of understand those emotions, paranoia hurts, man, when you're dealing with that one. And so trying to hold that can be very devastating for a person. Biologically, my nervous system was completely dysregulated to where I was in a fight or flight state. So trying to calm down, if you're going to tell me to calm down when my nervous system is just fired up constantly, it was really difficult. So I really had to separate the brain trauma from my mind activity and really place those two in different categories. Because now my mind, if I started to feed the fear and the anxiety, it would actually get worse and I would spiral. So I think that's kind of what I was dealt with in my deck of cards at the beginning.
What was the response from people around you when you went through this? Was there support? Was there, what was that reaction from your colleagues?
Man, in reference to my colleagues at the time, I would get a phone call from my supervisor, my captain at the station, be like, "Hey, are you all right?" And, that was pretty much it. I was also kind of stubborn in a sense where I felt I could do this on my own. And so I didn't really reach out for help. I did hit a point where the anxiety got so bad where I started dealing with suicide ideation. And at the time, the system that was set in place by the city wasn't as productive. So I had called the city psychologist and I reached out to them, spoke to one of the psychologists, and they said, "Hey, you have 3 months of a wait time before you even get to see me. Basically, I have to see 4,000 other members. And also, because this is a workers' comp claim, I can't get involved. So that's really what I was left with. And that's when I started taking things in my own hands. And at the same time as well, I was dealing with workers' comp. They weren't doing anything for me. I actually had a neurologist who told me this is anxiety and just left me with paperwork and a prescription for an anti-anxiety medication. When I was telling him, this is a traumatic brain injury issue and I've never had anxiety in my life. And that's all he left me with. So that's when I really started taking things into my own hands and started to study traumatic brain injury and what it can do for someone.
Do you think that the workman's comp issue, I mean, obviously we know it's a big problem. The whole workman's comp system is broken for the most part. Do you think it's, sometimes the results or the reaction to things like this are because they don't know what to do, or they just view you as a liability now for the city?
I think it's liability. I think it's red tape. I think the Western medical system is limited. In reference to traumatic brain injury, there's not much out there or people who really understand the injury, the complexity of it. Luckily, I had found a book called The Concussion Repair Manual by Dr. Dan Engel, who really understood concussions, and because he had one himself. So through his own healing journey, he had wrote this book, and it was really in depth on how you have to stack your treatments. So not one thing is really going to be the grand all effective treatment, but stacking them is going to support you in your path of recovery, essentially. And it's different for every single person. So I think one of the good things he had on there was a schedule, like a calendar. So you write down your symptoms every day. Over time, you see the symptoms get less and less. And so you also have a pattern of symptoms. So with that, you're able to go to your doctor, your neurologist, whatever workers' comp doctor. You're like, hey, these are my symptoms. I'm being very precise on how I'm managing what's coming up. And I think that was really effective. Luckily, I found that book. He's a great doctor. He's got other different books too, but that one was really what helped me.
I can see how keeping a record of those symptoms, and when they start to abate, you can kind of see, and it can give you hope, right? When they're getting less and less.
Yeah. I mean, it seems hopeless, at the time. And what was really important for me though, is I had mentors who were able to help me. I had an LAPD detective who helped me understand the workers' comp system. And he was teaching me on the idea of what happens to you when you're separated from your tribe. And then I had a couple really advanced spiritual leaders who really understood the spirituality of everything and the metaphysics of everything. And I had my fiance at the time, she actually helped me a lot because she is a yoga teacher. And so she understood Ayurvedic medicine. And then one of my other mentors understood Chinese medicine. So what happened was I combined Chinese medicine with Ayurvedic medicine to understand
What's
the complexity.
Ayurvedic medicine? I'm not familiar with that term.
Ayurvedic comes from East India.
Okay.
So those traditions are built in from those ancient practices, those ancient technologies that they use in, let's say, most of yoga tradition. But yoga tradition is just like the movement of yoga we understand from the Western world is one sliver of what yoga actually is. So that's what kind of started my healing journey. And luckily I was able to stack my treatments and then also get the understanding underneath everything. And then also move forward with constructive, I would say, guidance with trying to recover from this.
What were some of those early symptoms that you logged that you were dealing with on a regular basis?
Well, I'd have to say that the injury was the catalyst, right? And so I had to go back and understand what were the events leading to the catalyst to make me change my behaviors, my patterns, and the way I saw myself. So one of those things was I was an alcoholic. I didn't realize I was an alcoholic for 15 plus years, where every single day I was not at work, I had an alcoholic beverage in my hand. So during the injury, drinking was my way to cope. And drinking alcohol is very detrimental to the brain, especially when you're trying to heal gray and white matter in the brain. It disrupts gray and white matter in the brain. So at the time when I was first recovering, I kept drinking, and that made the symptoms probably 10 times worse. So that was one thing I had to struggle with, was my addiction issues. And when I had to cut alcohol out of my system, everything revved up even more, because I was going through withdrawals and I was going through a traumatic brain injury recovery. So that was one of the harder things, was the withdrawal part. And then the nervous system dysregulation caused me to be in fight or flight. I would just walk to the store from my house and my hands would be extremely sweaty. My feet would be extremely sweaty. I was waking up in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. with my heart rate at like 120 and just drenched in sweat. So this was something that was extremely difficult to regulate on my own. So acupuncture helped me a lot with regulating my nervous system, my adrenals, and understanding how the system's all functioning together.
How were you motivated, inspired? What was the driving factor for you to kind of seek out these types of modalities and to seek out, how did you even know where to go to get help?
Man, honestly, it is the grace by some other divine force, because it all landed in my lap. I really didn't seek much help. It kind of just fell into my path. So that's what really was beautiful about this story, is that these modalities began to just be there. And luckily I had that. And looking back on it now, I've learned all these things, and now I'm able to teach people struggling with traumatic brain injury with these types of ways to cope with the injury, and also the intelligence I was able to overcome, or to obtain from the injury, on a spiritual level, on an emotional level, and having more compassion for other people who are dealing with the same thing, in reference to even just PTSD.
Do you think that this is something that leadership within first responder agencies in general, we're not going to get specific in your agency because you're working, how leadership should be more in tune to what's available and how to take care of their people?
That's a hard question, because I work for one of the biggest departments in the United States. So their span of members to help and try to manage is extremely difficult for them. I would say for leadership to grasp what's at bay is it's a liability thing, number one, absolutely. And the other thing is they are overwhelmed. And with the complexity of this wave of behavioral health issues, along with people getting injured on the job, along with the call volume, along with the budget crisis we deal with. I was at the Palisades, and the morning of the Palisades, we had a captain come in and giving us a letter from the chief saying, we're going to cut your funding due to the mayor because of budget issues, and we're going to close down 9+ stations or something like that. That was the potential letter we had
on the morning of the Palisades fires.
The morning of the Palisades.
Wow.
And this is kind of like a guesstimate of what we were briefed with. I don't really remember the details of what we were exactly briefed with. That was like a summarization. But that's and then once the Palisades did happen, then they fired the chief. And then on top of that, now we're still dealing with the budget crisis. So the behavioral health stuff just goes in the back end. All the injury prevention goes in the back end. Yes, they'll put up a newsletter and say, hey, we are supplying you with this information, which is limited. And here you go. That's it. It wipes their hands clean of any liability. If something does happen, they'll say, hey, we put up a newsletter for some type of awareness towards injury prevention or even mental health issues. But does anything really get done? Me personally, the answer would be no. And I'm speaking for the masses in my department in that context.
I think that's probably you probably I probably hear those stories across the country with, especially large departments like LA, that are strapped with, budgetary issues and scheduling and all this stuff. I was talking to someone yesterday and we were talking about sleep, the issue of sleep, and
Mm,
how detrimental a lack of sleep is to agencies. And this gentleman said that, if they would just shift the schedule to start at 8 p.m.
mm,
instead of in the morning, it would be better for you, because now you're coming in, if you're working 24 or 48, you start at 8, you work your full cycle, you end at 8, now you're going home, going to sleep. And he said that would be one of the solutions to, some of those issues. Obviously, when you run a station like many of the stations in LA, you're not going to sleep at night anyway. You're up all night. So what is
yeah, I
what is
mean,
your
those
response
are
to
great
that?
ideas. Those are
Mhm.
great ideas, and I'm in the business of accepting what is at the moment in time. And for me, seeing in the future, if something like that would actually be placed as a policy is really far fetched.
Mhm.
And so I'm in the business of also being honest with myself about things and not wasting my energy on things I can't control.
Sure.
So a thing about that too is like, hey, like with the veteran suicide and the first responder suicide epidemic that we deal with, we are met with policy, with like a wound that we're dealing with,
Mhm.
and paperwork and just cold fluorescent lights.
Mhm.
That's what we're met with when it's literally a wound in the collective field of these people who come to work every day to serve their communities and risk their lives.
Mhm.
So this is like a diluted truth that no one really wants to face, which I want to be this living embodiment of this unbreakable spirit, what I think I am and what I think all these men and women are. And so with that, what we're just met with is like PTSD is it's just a side effect, with all this. And it's like a systemic consequence of a machine that has to keep running, and we're seen as assets, not as souls.
Yeah.
And so with that harsh truth, I mean, we have to just really band together with boots on the ground type mentality and come up with what can you do in the moment? What are the things, the opportunities we can use with this administrative betrayal that we all deal with?
Mhm.
That's
So
just my viewpoint on it.
yeah. So isolation is a huge issue when it comes to mental health. And you said yourself, when you were, you only had maybe the captain reach out to you. And so I'm sure you felt isolated and alone. How can first responders, firefighters like yourself, feel more connected when they're going through difficult times? What needs to happen to get those closer connections, those real genuine human connections that where you feel supported and cared for by those around you?
Peer support. That's the best answer. Like peer support is one of the main things that has to rise up for isolation issues, and with that disconnection factor, and with the community medicine, the medicine of community, really peer support is number one. And then you get the training, and on top of that, I think a lot of us firefighters, and speaking of for all first responders, we are akin to speaking more to our peers than calling up a list of your insurance providers list that they have for you to go see a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just from my own experience, and then speaking for others who felt the same thing.
Mm-hmm. So in your recovery, as you started getting well, and even in like you dealt with your alcoholism, what was the thing that worked for you to first to overcome the alcoholism? Because that's a huge challenge. Were you're part of a 12-step program? What was that program like for you?
Yeah, man. This is a crazy story that really helped. What the medicine that really helped me was my girlfriend at the time, my fiance now, she was doing this medicine called Kambo. And she was doing it because she was addicted to cocaine. And she also had issues with her menstrual cycle. And so her mentor told her to go do Kambo to help her with all her medical imbalances. And so what happened was she kept telling me to go do Kambo with her. And I was like, well, what is it? And she was telling me it's this Amazonian medicine, and you take the secretion off this frog and you put it on your skin, and you're going to be in a room with this guy that put this medicine on you, and you're going to throw up in a bucket. And I was like, there's no way I'm doing that. My anxiety got so bad, and my suicide ideation got so bad. My paranoia got so bad where I would go into catatonic states. And so there was one moment where I did go in a catatonic state in public. And I was like, I'm not calling 911. I'm not doing anything, So I told my girlfriend, I was like, hey, okay, I'm going to go do some Kambo. After my first session, it started to reverse my symptoms immediately. And so this medicine is really profound in the way it works. It just, essentially, it's very intelligent. It knows exactly where your imbalances are in your body. And within 40 minutes, these peptides that are in the medicine go through your system and start recovering what's out of balance in the body, bringing it into harmony. So I did Kambo around like maybe 10 sessions, and it started to rewire my nervous system. It started to rid my body of toxins, because the body cannot heal when it's under stress and when it's filled with toxic waste. So the body, when you're vomiting out things, you're essentially vomiting out any type of toxic issues you have going on, candida overgrowth in the body, parasites. And this, if it comes out your mouth, it's going to go out the other way too. So same thing. What the medicine did for me as well was after I was done with the session of Kambo, I had no desire for alcohol. Like as soon as I would put it to my lips and I would taste it, I just had this aversion to it. I just stopped drinking. So Kambo's been used for addiction issues as well. So that's what really started my healing journey. And what that medicine also does is that it will make you face emotional issues you have avoided your whole life. So I had to face my abandonment wound with my mother. I had to face my betrayal wound with my dad. And what comes up is when you're in that medicine, it is you just feel a memory come up or an emotion come up, and you start putting the pieces together like, oh, wow, I'm angry for this memory. And what happens is you have a visceral release with the medicine. You have this acceptance for that moment, and then you're able to clear it from your system. So that's really what took me to my rapid healing process. And it took care of I would say 80 to 90% of my symptoms. And then after that, I actually became a Kambo practitioner because the medicine helped me so much. And I now help other people with the similar issues.
Wow. That's something I've not heard of it. Is it like a psychedelic? Is that in that
No,
family?
it's non-psychoactive.
Okay.
It's non-psychoactive, but it is considered an entheogen.
Okay.
What entheogen medicines are revered as or has reverence for is the fact that it allows you to do your own healing in different planes of consciousness. So what it can do for you is just bring information from your field, have you process it, and now you're able to clear it. So that's what an entheogen has been referred to as.
How long did it take you to get back to a place where you're able to get back to work and to function normally again?
I did have to go through some physical therapy. I had issues with my jaw where I hit my head. So I had enormous amounts of swelling in my jaw. I had some blocked jaw, some TMJ, along with some things with my neck, the way I hit my head. And so that had to get also balanced out. So it was just, like I said before, stacking my treatments. So continuing that, it took me about almost a year until I think it was about 10 months till I actually went back to work. And because little things would trigger symptoms like lights, loud noises. And that's what I go to work to do. It's like I'm dealing with that every hour of a shift,
Right. Yeah. So what do you do today on the daily to keep yourself balanced and healthy and be able to, do your job and to live a normal, healthy life?
It's a lifestyle. I had to shift my lifestyle for sure.
Was that hard?
I think It was for me, when you hit rock bottom, you just can't go back. And so now I have, a playbook of practices that I do. And they can change, I work with a Qigong master. And so I integrate martial arts with Qigong and to regulate my nervous system and to just soothe the body, just help ground my system. And I also do a exercise called Human Garage, which is truly amazing. It helps the body get out of stress and helps regulate the nervous system. And these things have been like non-negotiable for me. So those have been my practices. Meditation's been huge for me. I started meditating during my head injury because it became such a great modulation for the mind, because the mind was still going erratic, especially like getting off work and not being in that fast-paced lifestyle. I had to sit still with myself and use the art of stillness to just see what's going on, check in with myself, go inward, and just dump out all the excess debris in the mind.
We are such complex human beings, right? And it takes, when that complexity is broken, it takes a lot to get it back to a normal, healthy state. And I've seen so many different things work for people, and you're just another example of that, as something that has worked for you to bring you back. So let me ask you this: what brings you joy?
Connection, for sure. Human connection and connection to myself. And, I think being able to see through all the lies and feel truth is what joy can bring me.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel that you work, when you're on the job, that you experience joy?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the job is awesome. I mean, we do the craziest stuff, and I'm not bored. So I think I could never be behind a computer desk. I'm just not wired that way. And so I love showing up to work and enjoying the connection to everyone at the station, and being able to just be the center of chaos is like one of my favorite things to do. And it's definitely a skill. I think there's the part of it that's hard is when we meet the job with poor leadership. And I've been dealt with a large array of different types of poor leadership. And so I've been able to get out of those stations where the leadership is poor. And I think that does hurt the departments when there is poor leadership and a lack of continuity and like revolving doors too.
That's a recurring theme that I've heard time and time again across the country, is that the lack of good, healthy leaders.
Anyone listening, and everyone in the first responder world, right? You have to be the change. If you want something to change, you have to stand up and be a leader in your own life first. And let that ripple within your family, and then let that ripple out within your community, and then also at work. So if you want change, make it happen. No one's going to do it for you. And what it really starts with is the ownership of your own shit. So it's like you have to look inward and see how you show up in your own life. The most of the poor leaders I have dealt with, their kids hate them. They have multiple divorces, and this job is their life. It's their identity. And so I think it's really important to look at that. And I always tell people, like, even with patients at work or anyone that we're working with, look at their hygiene. If someone has poor hygiene, it's a direct reflection of what's going on inside.
Sure.
Look at their home life. It's a direct reflection of what's going on inside of themselves. So I've been determined to see that everything is a mirror. And we have to honor that perspective. And the only way we can really make that leadership change really is, yeah, we have to have these paradigms of this old generation who are just stuck on old ways of believing how things do work. It's dying off right now. Mm-hmm. So right now we're dealing with a resurrection of what's to come, and that leadership's going to evolve in that way if we see it that way.
Well, those are some great words, and I think we're going to end it there. Some powerful things that you said there. You had a line there that said, "Be a leader in your own life first," and that's, I think that's going to be the underlying theme for this episode. Is like, yeah, that's what we have to do. I have to lead myself first if I'm going to lead the people around me in an effective way. It has to start with me. And it's like another firefighter friend of mine told me on the podcast a few months ago. He said, the most important person in your life is you. You got to start with you. And because if you're just trying to take care of everybody else first and you're not taking care of you first, it's the old cliche, go on an airplane, what they tell you, put the mask on yourself first before you put the mask on your kid or the person next to you. And that's what we have to do in leadership. You have to take care of yourself first and lead yourself first. So,
yeah, I totally agree with that. And if I could leave anyone with some words of advice, is be careful with what you identify with, because I guarantee that most of those identities are just masks that you're wearing, and it's not a reflection of who you truly are. So that reflection of who you really are is the great journey. And that's where the beautiful things in your life will evolve from. It's not on what you're pretending to be.
So you have a podcast. Tell us about your podcast. Where can we find it and where can we connect with you?
Yeah, totally. This podcast started from some suicides that happened in our own department, and I felt like there was a necessity to do something about it. I'm now seeing that this podcast has evolved into being a podcast of empowerment. And to see past, just the diagnoses, and to see past all of the things that we can't control, and to really find solutions to what actually is going to work for people. So that's what I'm determined to find, is what's going to help people. And I'm also really good at helping people dissolve their problems and putting language to some of these things. So that's my determination and that's my path. So, it's a heart-based project. I work full time and I come home and then I will record an episode, but it's really amazing. I mean, I've been involved with a lot of beautiful people. I saw on the list of people I've had Morgan England, and I've had Maddie on the podcast, and they're awesome people to connect with. And I think it takes an army to deal with what we're faced right now with this crisis.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. What's the name of the podcast again? Just so everybody knows.
Grab Lives. Sorry about that. Yeah, it's called Grab Lives, and you can find it on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple.
All the typical things. Yeah, great. Well, Jon, thank you so much for being here today, being on the show. Thank you for reaching out, and it's great to talk to you. I'm glad you're in a better place, in a healthier place, and you're moving forward to the future that you have.
Yeah, brother. Thank you so much for having me on, and I appreciate you.
Jon's story is one of resilience, responsibility, and ultimately transformation. While some of the healing methods he talks about may not be mainstream and probably isn't for everyone, they reflect a truth we often hear on this show, that healing is personal and there is no one-size-fits-all approach. What matters most is that we keep having these conversations. We keep listening, learning, and leaning into what works for each person, and maybe what works for you. Whether it's peer support, traditional therapy, or a holistic path like Jon's, we need to create more space for these stories. If this episode resonated with you or someone you care about, please share it. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast so you won't miss any future episodes. And finally, please remember that you are not alone. And if you need someone to talk to and don't know where you can turn, you can dial 988 for help. Until next time, be well, take care of yourself and those around you, and go out and do something good in the world.